the challenge series. As this episode we have Brands Hatch, Highlands Drift Circuit, Red Bull Ring, and Valungo. The points there. After the side, I already covered the kind of points story at the end of the previous episode. I need to really go into detail with it again. But I did the math, and at this point in time, there's been 180 points on offer for winning every single race in a row. Or at least the maximum points per one driver. And Travis has scored over half of the maximum points that a driver could have right now. The most you could have was 180, and that's if he won all 12 races so far. He's got 100 of them. So he averages about 9 points per race. No, like 8.5. But anyway, into Brands Hatch, which I don't have particularly high expectations for. We might see some funky stuff into turns 1 and 2, but besides that, this might be another conga line. For Brands Hatch, interesting pole sitter. I think this is like the third time this has happened for Thrasher, and he's not converted a win from literally any of them. Travis should be able to further his points lead, considering he starts ahead by 2 places on Yoshiro. Garrison will certainly be able to rebound a little bit after his previous event. Previous few events haven't really gone too well for him. DNF'd in Classic Monza Road Course. And I don't think he scored points at Magione, I want to say. He's certainly gotten a fast start here. Thrasher was literally helpless against that takeoff. And Yoshiro's taking the fight directly to Travis. Okay, well that happened. Just right around the outside of a corner I don't really think about passing at all. Can't say I expected that. So that gives her a bit of an advantage. And obviously, well, the more places she can get from here, the better. Thank you, Captain Obvious. Though passing here can be pretty difficult in GT3 cars. Not so much in touring cars, but unfortunately these are not that. So Yoshiro is going to have to work quite hard to get to them. So you may hear a couple of like mini yawns here and there. I should probably have gone to sleep instead of starting this recording, but I kind of wanted to fast track challenge series a little bit. As with the Slipstream Racing series, preview of which is on my channel, was uploaded I think yesterday or the day before that. Very recently. Very recent video. To see, yeah, this is the area I expected a lot of things to happen. Both Riley and Ryan have overtaken Thrasher in turn 2. Well, Ryan should be able to if he does what Yoshiro did. I think he's just barely gotten clear. Nope. Or at least he doesn't seem to believe so, which therefore meant that he wasn't, and Thrasher will regain third at least. But Garrison is already some ways away. It is a Corvette 1-2 here at Brands Hatch. All this arguing is quite a double-edged sword for Yoshiro, as it lets her get closer to the cars in front, but if she doesn't make quick work of them, Travis also gets closer to her. So it can go both ways. But at any rate, that preview mentioned the series will begin in October. And Well, originally, the idea, before I made that video, was Challenge Series is gonna have 2 more tiers after this. F tier and S tier. However, that wouldn't be the end of the series, but that would be like, those would be like the main platforms on which to base all other championships on. So, the next championship that comes after Tier S may just be like Tier B, but with a couple of changed vehicles to incorporate drivers that weren't there before. Or to like maybe, you know, at the same time as doing that, also like remove the driver that won that previous championship to get, you know, somebody new to win it. And while also doing that, kind of, you know, bring the power band of all the competing vehicles close together. There's, well, not much happening, and I feel like I've been saying that a lot in this tier, but that's just kind of how it goes. The glory of these AI passing each other will only come when they're driving spectacularly different cars. There really isn't that much of a difference between any GT3 car and another. So the AI find it really hard to pass, or at least harder than they would in road cars. I'm sure I was gonna try for one here. And she will take 5th away. And just as I was saying that the race was starting to get a little boring, Yoshiro was like, okay, bet. Send. But, yeah, so the original plan was to finish this tier, finish F tier, and finish S tier. So that, you know, if, because obviously I'm not going to be able to perfectly balance both series. I'll probably find one series more enjoyable than the other. And while neither series will go away completely for a while, either way, you know, obviously one series is going to get a little more attention than the other. So, if in the event that SRS ends up getting a lot more attention than Challenge Series, which, let's face it, for at least the first couple of episodes, that's almost a guaranteed thing, I'm going to upload multiple consecutive episodes of SRS before returning to Challenge Series. And when this happens, depending on how long that trend continues for, I wanted to have a representative amount of Challenge Series out before going down that path. While the Challenge Series wouldn't be ending when SRS came to be, it would certainly slow down. It's already had a couple of slow points, namely a couple of days ago when I went a long time between episodes 1 and 2 of this tier. Hopefully that won't be such a problem later, because the racing will be more interesting due to them being in more, you know, more unique, more polarized vehicles, as opposed to them all being in GT spec cars, like this one. I think that is, like, I often say, while this race hasn't really been that interesting and whatnot, and I do thoroughly believe that a lot of the cause of that does come from the vehicles involved. Like, you get a race between, like, a Ford GT40 and GTR Nismo. That's not really a normal thing that happens, and it creates a bizarre set of affairs from 2 drastically different vehicles from 2 drastically different parts of automotive history. But all of these cars are literally designed to be mostly competitive against one another. As John Garrison is going to take a win at Brands Hatch, complete the 1-2 for the Corvettes. Thrasher will hold on to a podium. And Yoshiro will close in 2 more points on Travis's points lead, and bringing it down to 12, I believe. Yes, 12. And now we'll have, which would hopefully be one of the saving graces of this second half of the championship, the Highlands Drift Circuit, which is a totally new circuit to the series. I expect these two races should also be interesting. Spa seems to be actually, strangely enough, more entertaining with more evenly matched cars than it does with cars that are like road going and kind of mismatched. Anyway, well, the original Highlands and Highlands the long circuit focused more so on the roads that kind of go outward and are long stretches of road with heavy bumps. The drift circuit, from what I'm aware, tends to more revolve around sweeping corners. And those sweeping corners, when the AI decide to get any amount aggressive on them, which is what they're supposed to do, may result in crashes. It's my hope. The grid, brain work, please. Starting grid of the Highlands drift circuit, and, well, it wouldn't be the track in the Highlands if it weren't foggy, because that seems to always happen. This will be interesting, though, as our 2 points leaders are starting last, or second from last, and third from last. So, this pivotal event will be, the advantage will go to the person that can make their way through the field the best. Yoshiro seems to have a better knack for doing that than Travis. I think that might be just based on the attributes of the car, rather than the attributes of the driver. And we are at a standstill, as the leaderboard is confused and thinks that I'm leading because I teleported to the pit lane. As Eric gets ahead early, he really got away from Dietrich, who seemed to have been caught sleeping at the wheel or something. As he also got overtaken possibly by Riley there in her Corvette. Thing is, because of all the sweeping corners, the track will kind of go from left to right to left to right quite a bit, and that's when we'll see these kind of long drawn out too wide moments as the shading does not know what to do with the fog there. Finally, Dietrich makes a slip and Riley takes the place away. And now he has the other Corvette for company, Garrison, looking to really make a rebound after his previous episode being kind of a fruitless effort. As Travis has actually regressed, meanwhile Yoshiro is up to 11th. One more pass and she will be scoring. And now what I found interesting is, like, so the 488 is a newer car, and also, generally speaking, Eric is probably a more highly trained driver, and yet, and I think obviously this probably just comes from the starting grid. As you can see, the track is shorter than the full circuit. It'll be about an 8-minute race here, probably, thereabouts. As the front few cars are kind of awkwardly spread out. And then after 5th place, Taylor leads the great chain of cars, going from 6th back to like 14th place. This, as I was saying previously towards the end of Brands Hatch, was plans changed when it came to that, because, well, as you can see, October is going to hit before I finished the challenge series, or at least, you know, the initial benchmark, 7 tiers of the challenge series, rather not necessarily done with it. For those think back to to Universe 0, how Acts 1 through 11 were the official canonical ones, 12 through 20 were the ones that were meant to, or 12 through 19 were the ones that were kind of meant to play around with different characters and explore the backgrounds of other drivers in the Universe Zero way of thinking, as opposed to the original versions of some of those Hot Wheels characters that were conceived from their source material. Source material referring to the games they came from, as well as the story crafted around the playthroughs that the other channel, He Made Blocks, did. That I based that around, and whom actually watched those videos for as long as he was doing the Hot Wheels playthroughs concurrently. Riley is there on Eric, but kind of seems like this layout isn't as conducive to overtaking as I remembered it being. Not really many heavy braking areas other than the final corner and the first corner, like the second corner, which the AI aren't going to use to pass anytime soon. So yeah, so there was no way I'd finish the plan or the major challenge series run in the due time. And yeah, then also Act 20 was the official ending, which was also, you know, a thing that was credited as canonical, whereas, you know, like Tiers 12 through 19 for the most part weren't. Or even if they were in some regards, they weren't counted as part of the main storyline running through Universe Zero. Time Loop had no such thing. It just had a couple of filler episodes every now and then, but everything about the series was still loosely tied to the main plot line of defeat Paradox and defeat Carbon. So, because even the filler races were usually them trying to locate the villains, or at least they were supposedly doing. Series outside of Assetto Corsa do kind of have this suspension of disbelief thing going, in that you just kind of have to go with what I say is happening. Like, Assetto Corsa, I can rename the AI. So, calling this driver Eric is, you know, logical, because that's literally the name of their head or on the leaderboard. And, you know, obviously the game is going to refer to them as that, so I should also do that. Sometimes I'll refer to them by the car they're driving, because they'll forget to say their name. But 9 times out of 10, it is correct to just refer to them by the driver name, because that's a name that's just there. When it comes to Universe Zero, the same can be said, because again, that was Assetto Corsa that edited the username, that edited the driver names for the AI drivers. With Project Cars 2, with Time Loop, and in the future when Slipstream Racing series rolls around, it doesn't really say that. And you just, you know, it's a kind of a roll with the type of thing, and some people that look at that just kind of wonder what the point of it is. My grandma was one of them that just kind of didn't really see the idea in the sort of like identity crisis thing, and it's like, it is weird because despite it being a thing that I plan to do and have been doing in some way, shape, or form for some time now, I still couldn't really explain what makes what makes it interesting to me or to other people, or B, what actually makes it, like, you know, a thing worth doing on a YouTube series. And I don't know. Maybe I'll find the answer as I do Slipstream Racing series, which is a thing where you're totally going to have to play it by ear, because the game straight up says, like, you know, you look at the 3 car and it's like, oh, that's Austin Dillon. Well, actually, no, that's this person, and it's just like, well, no, it clearly says Austin Dillon. No, shut up, it's the other person. Just like, it literally just goes directly against what is on the screen. And for the unengaged, that definitely can confuse you. And then in Time Loop's case, not only was that not the name showing over their head, you know, that Ferrari was just some random AI name. That Ferrari isn't, you know, like number 1. That BMW over there is not Ryan Storm. That's like Marcus Taylor or whatever those weird AI names they had. Also, holy crap, that race was nothingness. Neither of the 2 points leaders scored. Like, guess I learned my lesson there, not to use that layout again. John Garrison's worked his way back into the points picture. He is now within 15 of Travis. That is one race win away. Now you have Red Bull Ring, which hopefully will help to compensate for the last 2 races. And ironically, Highlands was actually worse than Brands Hatch. I could not have foreseen that outcome. Red Bull Ring, I forgot the name for a second. I don't know how I could have possibly forgotten the name of this track, but it is, it's a Nismo front row as you look here. Hikari is on pole. And, Nitori finally starts in the top half. It seemed like she started in the bottom 5 for the last 2 races every time. And once again, Yoshiro and Travis start right next to each other. Yoshiro this time starting ahead of him in the row, like in the following row. Or Travis is in the following row. I am good at speaking. And Garrison starts ahead of both of them, so this could be a chance for him to really make a statement and get himself like right up there, especially if Travis doesn't perform standard. And Nitori botches the start, giving Garrison basically a free spot. This is going to be a lengthy race. 6 laps around the Red Bull Ring. I am certainly banking on this one being a little more entertaining than the last few. Usually it is, but there's certainly not really a guarantee. Garrison's gonna try and make it 2 off the jump. And still running dead even with the other Corvette driver. That would be Riley. And they're still dead even. As once again, Thrasher starts very high on the grid. Still the leading not GTR. Looks like Garrison will finally begin to pull ahead of Riley and seal the deal. Meanwhile, Yoshiro has gone nowhere, but Travis is down to last. Not really sure what happened on his first lap, but oh boy, he's got some work to do now. His only benefit is the fact that Yoshiro is also not in the top 10. However, none of that will matter if Garrison keeps progressing his way up the field, as he may end up being the next biggest challenge if Yoshiro doesn't get her act together. And he's, as we speak, moving over to try and pass Thrasher. Oh, there's a collision. Too much curb there, John. Never gave Riley an opening, so that awkward moment has actually just given Nitori a free position instead. And possibly the same, nope, yep, Diedrich goes for it. So Garrison's screw-up actually costed Riley more than it costed him. And that's something how that works. Shiro still only managing 11th, and it could possibly be 12th if she gets passed by her fellow Ferrari driver down there with Eric. Which has, I think, happened. Nope, she keeps her splitter there, basically, and continues to defend, and I think she'll take it back there. It's the John and John show for the final spot on the podium. Not a typical passing zone, and Thrasher is driven completely out of space by the Corvette. It seemed Thrasher wanted to go down here and get revenge, but seemed to like think twice and let off, but still also stay down there for whatever unknown reason. I really couldn't tell you why he did that. As now here comes Nitori, seizing the moment of Thrasher's bizarre driving line. That's the best way I can word that. There's a knot in my face. As Wayne overtook Diedrich down that straightaway. Tried to do the same on Riley, but I don't think he's got the power. No, he kept his vehicle on the inside, so he has the shot. Based on how the AI react to being on the outside there, they back out before this corner, because it's not a corner you want to go too wide in unless you have to. But Wayne did not make use of that. Instead, he will put himself on the curb and remain 7th. He overtook Thrasher completely in his cerebral absence, as it were. And Garrison looks to track down the Nismo duo. Being that I said at the start of this championship and have been saying repeatedly throughout it that the Nismos are possibly the worst car in the tier, it's not to say that they cannot do well, because, I mean, any car in this category can do well just based on the way that the starting grids function. What's the lap time comparison there? Oh, yeah, he's gained over 1.5 seconds in one lap. That's something, alright. As here comes Riley attacking Thrasher. Yeah, Garrison may be catching the Nissans, but by the time he has caught them, unless he further steps up his pace, he will not have a very long time to actually make the moves, especially considering he'll have to pass 2 people, not just 1, if he's going to try and win the race. Travis is up into 13th, though that's still not quite a scoring position. He's got a little more work to do, but, well, I can't imagine it'll be an easy task. Gap should be down to, I would say, just over 1 second between him and 2nd. Actually, maybe less than 1 second now. I think this lap will crack into the minute 30s. Nope. But as long as he runs another lap like that, he will be on James's doorstep by the start of the final lap. And while that proceeds, and Wayne is about to attempt to overtake Thrasher, he will go supremely late into that corner and blow Thrasher's socks off with that braking maneuver. Yeah, so yeah, noticing that I hadn't made quite the amount of progress that I thought I would through the challenge series by this point, I expected to honestly be done with Tier F by this point, and I could just run Tier S alongside the start of Slipstream. However, that didn't work, so I just decided, you know what, regardless of how much progress I make in the challenge series for the SRS, because I've sat on the series for probably a couple of months at this point, and I would like to actually get it going. It's quite a long story as to how Slipstream Racing Series came to be, a story that'll most likely be covered in the series itself. James also seems to have upped the pace a little bit, as he is now also very close to Hikari, probably trying to escape. Garrison has actually caught him up to the leader. As Riley sets the fastest lap. Still not quite in the 30s realm, though. And Garrison is powerless into turn 2. Or turn 3, because technically the little kink on that straightaway is considered a corner. kiss my foot. So I think about that concept. Yeah, there'll be quite a bit of room for talking in this slipstream racing because, well, NASCAR games, if your car is comfortably in control, can be a bit of an autopilot type of affair after a few laps in a row. Especially if you're not racing a ton of people at once, which, with the way NASCAR games work now, that's not uncommon that happens. Not just how NASCAR games work, that's just how NASCAR works, period. As Hikari is going to win from pole, and it's going to be a 1-2 for the GTRs. And no minute 30 flat, no minute 30s here. And again, no points for either of the top two in the standings. They finished 11-12. I do believe that's also literally where they started. And as a result, in points, Garrison now whittles the lead down to 5. Yoshiro's still in the picture for the moment as, well, Travis didn't score anything, nor did she. And you can see just how a little more evenly balanced this championship is, because even as we get down to 6 races to go, everyone mathematically can win the championship. If Hikari won all 5 of the next races, if Travis did not manage to score like 10 points, Hikari would theoretically win the championship. I mean, there's also a lot more variables, because that means Garrison and Yoshiro can't score too much either, but it's all mathematically, theoretically speaking, a possibility that Hikari from 15th in points at 40 points. There's on to Valunga, which I really just thoroughly believe the starting grid will do much to determine the results of that one, because that's how this track normally works. Say Magione. You already did that one, thank God. Game is looking to try and balance out the championship even further by putting Shiro on pole, Garrison in a competitive 5th, and Travis down in 9th. If he performs here like he did the last championship, though, he should be able to make up a few places. However, in this scenario, Thrasher actually gets a good jump. Garrison maintains. James somehow got a better start than Nitori, and Yoshiro will end up staying ahead of Thrasher. Meanwhile, Travis obviously sees his circumstances, already got a better jump than Hammer, and tried to pass Miyako, but didn't, obviously, and still can't. No, James missed. Ituri did not take the opportunity. And Dietrich has tried to, is attempting to re-overtake Travis. And while Taylor is attempting to pass Garrison, I think she will do so. Yeah, I got the inside line for that kink, and that's the spot. This is precisely what Yoshiro needs to see in this event. She needs Thrasher to kind of be an obstacle, as Garrison just about runs Miyako off the road, trying to keep her behind him. Travis has retaken 8th from Dietrich. The points would be very interesting right now, because it would be 107 for Yoshiro as they run at this moment. 105 104. Because I forgot to say we're past John. Yeah, 104 for Garrison, and 107 for Travis. So it'd be a tie right now between Yoshiro and Travis, assuming he doesn't pass anyone else. I think it is a pretty safe bet that Yoshiro will win the race because she has Thrasher as a cushion. That and, well, I mean, like, let's be real here, passing at this track is not the easiest, as we've seen in the past. I feel like I say that a lot too. I'm not sure which I've said more in this championship. Passing here is difficult, or, well, this race hasn't been that interesting. That's just kind of the way it goes in this game. When you just have the AI race. The AI, that just, you know, artificial intelligence in racing games. I'm not gonna say it hasn't improved, but honestly it can be pretty hard to tell sometimes at face value. Like what the AI do in this game honestly is not anything that AI cars in like Gran Turismo 3 couldn't do. It just so happens there's also like way more of them. And that's kind of why it's sometimes harder to like see the forest for the trees in that regard. It's kind of like, oh, I can have 15 AI opponents in this one race, and kind of like neglecting the fact that those AI opponents are all very odd, well, autonomous, yes, that's really what they are, autonomous, automated, they're robots, Riker, but, you know, they have the patterns, they don't leave them, and they just, you know, they do exactly as they're supposed to do. They just follow the racing line, but there's no dynamic to the AI drivers, and really most racing games, because it's kind of hard to program the human element into an AI. As much as the action movies and complex future storylines in video games like to believe, like to make you think that that's a thing that we can do or have done. We haven't done it yet, if we even can. Video games are certainly, you know, certainly proof of that. It kind of raining back as this race has been a parade, more or less, after the first lap passed. Yeah, so SRS follows the time loop formula of associating a car with a different driver other than the one that's, you know, printed on that's like, you know, on the tin. I have to drive. There is no spectate AI option in NASCAR Heat 5. I have to do the gameplay myself. Also like time loop. And while it's not really story driven in the way time loop had like actual plot lines and such going on, there'll be little storylines that take place in SRS, but they're mostly, like, there's no overlining narrative of the good guys must defeat the villain, or villains, in Time Loop's case. SRS is more just like little miniature background information that just kind of gives a bit of context on things. Or indicates certain events happening in the league in the background, or, you know, in the foreground. But of course, all of that is really just down to, like, hearsay. There's nothing else dictating that those things are happening other than because I say they are. Oh, nice. That's not quite it. You know, as I mentioned, the 3 car, the game clearly says it's Austin Dillon, and it is Austin Dillon in real life. It's just a matter of the way that Slipstream Racing Series is going to work. We're going to pretend that's somebody else. Or another example, better example, 95, is Christopher Bell. The game will tell you that, that's who it is in real life, and there's not really any visual argument against it. And yet, in the Slipstream Racing Series, that's actually going to be Gina driving the 95, associated with that vehicle in the first season. So it's kind of like, you know, again, it's suspension of disbelief. You just kind of have to assume. You just kind of have to, you know, like, use your imagination and just kind of go with what I say. And that kind of, like, it's like playing pretend, like you would do with your dolls or your little Hot Wheels cars when you're like 6 years old, but using a video game. And I can kind of see why my grandma didn't really think it was really interesting, but it's not, it's, you know, it's the same way that made that Hot Wheels playthrough I was mentioning earlier that inspired Universe Zero and Time Loop was the additional narrative and storyline in the background of the game, and all of the, albeit flat but still there, characterizations of, you know, named characters in the games, and even just giving personalities to individual vehicles that appeared multiple times in the Hot Wheels games. For example, 16 Angels and like Twin Mill and Rigger Motor, for example. Because those games, other than Velocity X and kind of Stunt Track Challenge, those Hot Wheels games didn't really have any kind of story. They just kind of had a structure to them of like, do this in this order, and then do this race, and then that race, until you do things that unlock the thing, and there's no real structure to it. There's no real reason for the game to be happening other than because you've turned on the system and put the disc in. Not necessarily in that order, but at any rate, but this particular run-through of all of these Hot Wheels games made it, like, interesting because there were other characters, there were things to note, there were things to mention in the background, things to make jokes about, and things to, you know, things to add twists to what happens with these characters, and how they interact with each other in the game, how the game happens to somehow occasionally line up with how things happen, how things happen can be influenced by events in the game, whether planned or otherwise, and it adds a personal touch as well as an extra layer to the game. You know, you make your own storylines, and like, it's like almost like WWE in a way. It's not scripted necessarily, but it's kind of like, you know, it is a form of entertainment mostly based around, you know, in the idea of an underlying background story to it. There is no story in SRS. It is based solely off of a championship type of thing. But there's still little kind of tidbits. Also, that's the end of the episode. Those points are interesting. It is now a tie for the lead between Yoshiro and Travis. And Garrison only 3 points out of that tie, as we have 4 races to go. So the next episode, the last part for Tier E, will be Vallelunga Classic, which I don't think has been used yet. I don't anticipate it'll be used again. And then Spa, Nürburgring GP, and then the first visit to the Nordschleife for the season finale, or the championship of the season. No, not that. Here's hoping it remains interesting to the final race, but that's far from a guarantee, I can tell you that.